Once again, I will be sharing my screen with you. My screen is coming up right now. All right, as we go to my screen, the screen is coming up, and that is my screen for you. I hope you're seeing it. And today we'll be looking at materials connected with the endocrine gland. Specifically, we are dealing with hormones. We are dealing with hormones, right? Remember, it was part of the material we considered under homeostasis when I started. So, but for today, we'll look at specifically the ones that are called the pituitary gland. So from what is here right now, I think you can see it now very well, right? I'll be dealing with the pituitary gland and its hormones. The pituitary gland in my previous discussion has been identified as a very important gland in the human endocrine system. What are the objectives of this brief lesson? By the end of this lesson, we'll be looking at the meaning of the pituitary gland, the location of the pituitary gland, why it is called a master gland, and also parts of the pituitary gland. And finally, you should be able to identify the hormones of the pituitary glands and their function. It will also be good for us to look at this one that talk about the effect of oversecretion and undersecretion of these hormones of the pituitary gland. Without much ado, let's hit the ball rolling by looking at the pituitary gland itself, right? From what you can see on this, and let's take a close look at it now. If you look at what I have here, the gland itself is a very important gland that is located in the brain, right? The brain. And when you look at the side view of the brain, you have what is called the side view showing what we call the cerebellum here. This region is the corpus callosum. This area is the cerebrum, known as the cerebral cortex. And we are going to be dealing with this small part in the midbrain here called the pituitary gland. When you magnify it, all right, and you magnify it with this my arrow here, it becomes something as large as this, all right? And it has two regions. The first region is the anterior region of the pituitary gland here, which is the front, and then the back region is the posterior region. Now, all these parts that have been itemized in red marker here, highlighting pen, actually shows you all the different hormones that are secreted by the pituitary gland. My target for this lesson is to briefly tell you what these hormones do. Now, basically, from what I've now said, what is a pituitary gland? It is referred to as the master endocrine gland that secretes hormones that control different parts of the human endocrine system. So where is it located? The pituitary gland is located in the midbrain. And once it is magnified, what are the parts of the pituitary gland? You have two regions here. This part called the anterior pituitary, that is the front, and then this part called the posterior pituitary. What are the hormones that are secreted by this pituitary gland? We have them as growth hormone, GH, thyroid stimulating hormone as TSH, FSH as follicle stimulating hormone, ACTH as adrenocorticotropic hormone, LH as luteinizing hormone, PRL as prolactin, and then these are the hormones that are produced from the anterior pituitary. As I always tell you, I'm being natural as much as possible. These are my drawings to make it simplified. And then here we have the posterior pituitary, which secretes hormone known as oxytocin, I abbreviated it as OXY, and antidiuretic hormone as ADH. So you can now identify the different hormones that can be produced by the pituitary gland. Not so? Now, what are the functions of these hormones? Briefly, let's hit the ball rolling. The growth hormone is simply for elongation of bones and increase in height. All right? The thyroid stimulating hormone actually is secreted to stimulate the thyroid gland in the neck in order to produce its own hormone. We have what is called the FSH there, all right? This is the FSH, known as the follicle stimulating hormone. What it does is that it stimulates the female ovary to produce its own matured egg from the ovary. Now, we also have what is called the ACTH. ACTH is known as the adrenocorticotropic hormone. This hormone, the impact is that it stimulates the adrenal gland on the kidney. I showed you a former image. It stimulates the adrenal gland on the kidney to produce hormones that regulate the glucose level of the blood and also the mineral content of the blood. These hormones that are regulated by ACTH are referred to as mineralocorticoids and also the glucocorticoids, right? So in subsequent video, I'll be presenting information on that, but take note that the ACTH stimulates the adrenal gland to secrete its own hormone. Then the LH, known as the luteinizing hormone, stimulates the female ovary to release ripe egg into the fallopian tube during the process of ovulation in females. Then the PRL, actually prolactin, stimulates the mammary gland of the woman that is pregnant, a mother, to actually secrete milk in order to breastfeed her baby during the process of lactation. So these are the functions of the hormones there for the anterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary, as you can see here, produces oxytocin that is very important in the process of labor. A woman is pregnant, and after 9 months of carrying her baby to term, the contraction that takes place in the womb stimulates the womb. The contraction in the womb is stimulated by oxytocin that actually allow delivery to take place, while antidiuretic hormones stimulate the kidney to reabsorb water. So this is a brief rundown of what the pituitary gland is all about. I believe the video was useful. So as a recap of what we have done, can you remember the answers to these questions again? What is the meaning of the pituitary gland? Basically, the master gland that secretes hormones that control the entire endocrine system. Where is it located? It's located in the midbrain. And why is it called a master gland? I mentioned it. Basically, its secretion controls the entire endocrine system. Then what are the two parts of the endocrine of the pituitary glands? We have them as the posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary. Then what are the hormones from the pituitary gland and their functions? We mentioned all of them, from FSH to growth hormone, GH to ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, to PRL, prolactin, oxytocin, OXY, and antidiuretic hormone, ADH, and others. Then we also talk about the effects. Now, I just want to summarize it with the effect. The effect now is that, let's take a look at the growth hormone. Once this growth hormone here is oversecreted, it becomes a giant. Once it is undersecreted, it becomes a dwarf. Now, during the period of normal growth, and then you have a sudden increase in growth hormone, the person can have a condition that is called acromegaly, where the palms of the hands become extremely larger than normal, and then the person has this broadening of the forehead and also large feet. Basically, these are hormonal abnormalities. So at this point, I believe the lesson was useful. I will stop sharing the screen. So this is a brief presentation that tells you that truly our pituitary gland is very important. So have a lovely day. This is Mr. Ape.